everybody, this is Steve Blair with Lyceum Insurance Services, and we have a part two with our friend and colleague, Althea Jacques from the Lyceum Insurance Services team. Althea has been with us for many years and manages our business insurance area, and last time we had a little discussion about cybersecurity, and I wanted to continue that discussion a little bit here in this and then talk a little bit about remote work and how that affects work comp as well. So one of the things, Althea, first of all, thank you for joining me.
Oh, no problem. Good morning.
But one of the things I wanted to chat about with you is the increased liability for organizations when employees are working remote, especially when we're talking about cybersecurity. And specifically with that, some ideas that employers should be thinking about when it comes to remote work and how to protect not only their businesses, but their insurance policies and making sure their insurance policies are current and up to date when the dynamic has changed from people working in a singular location. And my experience with employees working in a singular location is, they're using company equipment. They're accessing company data through company firewalls and everything like that. But with the pandemic and people working remotely, that changes things a little bit, doesn't it?
Yes, right. Correct, Steve. It changes things actually quite a lot because, we were kind of forced out of the workplace so suddenly, your employers didn't even get a chance to assess what kinds of things you have. In the past, when it was one person, because maybe an illness, they couldn't come into the office and you gave that one person permission to work at home, you had your IT guys set up everything.
Work out.
To make sure that things were still living to the company standards. Yes. But with everybody just all of a sudden we're out of the office one day, a lot of people didn't get a chance to do that. A lot of businesses didn't get a chance to do that. So you don't know what sort of firewalls your employees have. And also now they have company equipment where some of them did not before a lot of them left there. There are lots of businesses where people are still using desktops, or some businesses where they didn't allow you to take the business laptop home. But now employees are home, they're working there. You don't know what sort of security they have. You don't know if they're letting their children use their company laptop, which is an absolute no-no. You don't know if they're taking the laptop down now, to a wide area with Wi-Fi that's open and exposes your business and your customer data to hackers.
Well, so I'm thinking about like standardization. Does a company have a set of policies and procedures in place that standardizes how people should be working from home right now, especially when it comes to using those types of devices like, our cell phones or our iPads?
Yes,
for instance, my iPad, I don't have any business. This is just personal for me, and we have a very strict policy, especially given that we work with HIPAA data. We have a very strict policy when it comes to using personal equipment, but other companies may not think about that, and so I think it's important that everybody evaluates and maybe, if you had to come up with 5 things or 3 or 4 big topics that you think companies should be thinking about when it comes to cyber, especially with people working from home, what would those be?
I would say that they have to specify what can and cannot be done on company equipment. So don't go downloading games.
Yeah.
Don't be doing your Facebook on the company equipment and watching random videos or clicking on things like that. And of course, companies can put in place and block those sites as well. So specify the use of company equipment is definitely a must. Don't let your family members use the equipment as well.
Althea, if you had to give 5, maybe 5, 3 or 4 pieces of advice, maybe that companies should be looking at or evaluating when they're looking at their policies and procedures for remote work, what would that be?
I would say you have to specify the use of the company equipment, that it can only be used for business, no downloading of anything on the company equipment, really.
No games.
No Facebooking, no playing video games, because once you click on something, you download it, it can have a virus, it can have malware, you don't know. You should also, I'd say, have a dedicated space for that equipment. And we'll go into that more on the work comp side.
That's going to be our next one, though.
we want to have a space where this is a workspace, so the kids are not, I mean, everybody doesn't have a house, but they can have an office, but whether it's your dining room table and it's this corner of the table or it's this part of the basement, that's like your workspace, and it should be treated as such and have some sort of privacy around it, because you do have to comply with all the privacy, the HIPAA that you had to comply with in the office, you still need to comply with it, although employees are home. So I suggest, especially if you don't have an office door that you can close, that the employees have headsets or earbuds when they're talking with customers, so that if the kids are home doing their work, they're not hearing the entire conversation.
Great point. I never thought about that.
Because that's a privacy issue. If, I mean, you're a benefits broker, if someone calls and wants to talk to you about a health issue, and, you don't want the kids hearing that part of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
They should also, now that, they sort of realize, a lot of companies said, okay, we're not going back to office, so this is now a permanent state. Get your IT department. If you don't have an IT department, hire a consultant to come in and do analysis of what each employee has at their home and suggest things. Do you need to put, if you didn't have a VPN, do you need to get a VPN right now, so that employees are logging through one channel that is secure?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I did an interview on Monday earlier this week with a guy named Tom. He works for a company called High Touch Solutions, and they're an office supply type company, kind of on steroids. They could get really anything, and they do a lot in terms of helping set up home offices. And that was actually one of the recommendations that he made, is that if you're going to be doing this moving forward, that you kind of have a standardized thing as to what types of items should be in that space, what type of equipment should be used, and then they can actually set up kind of individualized budget so that employees can say, I need these items, and they're already pre-approved, and they go through and they're GL'd and everything like that. So It was kind of neat for me, as a long explanation for me to say, it was interesting to hear you say that. Kind of reinforces something that somebody else that works in that specific industry, kind of that office setup and office supply industry, said something very similar. So
well, the other thing also for employers to recognize, and employees as well, there might be some employers who are providing the equipment. Now, your equipment is location specific. So you had that nice office package policy that was ensuring your equipment in that building.
So now you explain 50, real quick?
You have 50 employees.
Explain what that policy means, just so.
Oh, the BOP is a business owner's policy that gives you your general liability coverage for your slip and falls, your libel and slander, but it also gives you property coverage for the stuff you own. So your desk, your chairs, your computers, everything in your office that you own.
So how does that now translate? It's still company-owned equipment if the company is purchasing it, but it's located at a facility that's not owned by the company. How does that work? And now that I think about it, how does it work when somebody leaves? What do they do with that equipment? That's so many questions.
Well, the first thing is what you wanted to make sure on your policy, and it's an easy little endorsement you can add, that there is coverage for property off premises.
There you go.
So
Awesome.
you've got to have coverage for, I mean, you don't have to insure actually the total amount. So if you have $100,000 worth of equipment out there, don't feel you have to get $100,000 limit, because the odds of everybody's house or apartment burning down at the same
Sure.
time or
Great
getting
point.
stolen at the same time
Yeah.
is very slim.
Yeah.
So you
I
can
like
say,
that
let's do
point.
50, or let's do, whatever the average, I would say, whatever the average price of the equipment is, that might be your starting point for equipment at other location coverage.
So when you're saying starting point, like if this was my office package, what my remote employees have, we're going to cover the average cost of that, but we don't need to cover it times 50 employees if we have 50 remote employees, because to your point, we're not going to have a total loss like we would if we were in an office and the office caught fire.
Correct.
So that's a great point, and I want people to understand this, not that there aren't, of course there's bad actors everywhere, but we want to make sure that our clients are getting the best value for their money. So if you work with somebody that's saying you need to protect all of this, it's important to have coverage, but you don't need to cover all of it. And there, in essence, somebody could potentially be trying to oversell you on premium, and we certainly wouldn't want to see that.
Right. So find that spot you're comfortable. So I'd say if it's, like I said, 100,000 out there, but the average cost of what each employee has at their home is maybe 10,000, you could do 10,000. But if you're more comfortable, say, what if something happens to two people, I feel better having $20,000 in equipment off premises there. And that's a great way to do it. The other part of it, though, is although some employees are home, they're using some of their own equipment. Like my printer I have here, I have a multi-function printer here. It's mine. It's not the company's. I have a company laptop, but the printer is my personal printer. You also have to make sure that now that it's kind of shifted, that your homeowner's policy covers you for equipment used in business, because there's some homeowners policy that have very limited coverage for that. And so you might want to talk to your homeowner's insurance agent and make sure that you're covered for that.
I'll be making a call shortly.
Yeah, because the way a lot of the policies were written before, incidental business, so I bring home my laptop once in a blue moon and I do some work. But now that you're working at home, they usually had a limit on how much money you could make while working at home in order for it to be considered an incidental use.
I'm thinking of myself. In my garage, I've got shelf units full of a lot of the office material that we had in our physical location that we've since brought here, where Janice and I are both working from home. So yeah, I think I need to make that call.
Well, I think actually, Steve, I know your agent, and I think you're covered for that. We do have
that's true. I do have great
we have coverage for equipment off and for accounts receivables and those kind of files.
Good. This is why it's important to have a very good representative to take care of your business and its risk management needs. Althea takes care of ours, and she does a wonderful job. So I'm actually protected. I didn't even realize I had the potential loss. So thank you, Althea. I think this is a great way to segment into the next part of our chat, which has to do with things employers should be thinking about, especially from a work comp perspective, when employees are working from home. And you and I had a very interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about, imagine you have an employee who's working at home. You don't have a policy corporately about work from home and a designated approved workspace while you're at home. And I get up from where I happen to be working that day and go into my kitchen and cut my finger, making myself a bagel during work hours. Do I now potentially have a work comp claim?
And it's still a very gray area.
Yeah.
If that happened, obviously at the office, there'd be no question about it.
Of course.
But if you're moving around, and that's one of the first things you should do when you have a remote work policy, the employee has to have that dedicated space. We don't want it moving around and they're moving from room to room through the day, trip over the dog or the cat, or a kid's toy on the floor, and then all of a sudden we've got a problem. If we have a dedicated space and an injury happens in that space, it's covered. The other thing, in addition to the dedicated space, you should specify the days and the hours of work.
There you go.
So obviously, if it's noon, let's say, and I go to get that bagel, that could be my lunch hour. It's kind of the equivalent of if I was at work and I left the building and went to Einstein Bagels to get a bagel, and something happens to me on that ride, that's not a work comp claim, because that's my lunch hour and I'm going. Now, of course, it's different if I was going to the bank to do a deposit for the company. That would be a work comp if I got into an auto accident.
Yeah, you're doing a work-related activity.
Correct. So it's still a very gray. And of course, all the claims adjusters are trying to figure out, well, so-and-so slipped and fell, stepped on the skateboard left in the hallway while they were at their home office. Is that a work comp claim? So again, the dedicated space, specify the hours of work, the days of work, because I know from my experience, I am getting emails from people all hours of the day, 9, 10 o'clock at night, whereas when people were at the office, that never happened. So are those employees authorized to work those times?
Yeah.
Or the other thing we come up with now with employees working these hours, are you complying with the Fair Standard Labor Act for non-exempt employee? Because if you have an employee working,
why don't you peel those layers apart on a very high level for us?
Yeah, if somebody's working 8 or 9 and they're non-exempt, you have to pay them overtime. I mean, if they're at the office working till 8 or 9, you would have been doing that. So you've got to make sure you're still complying with the labor laws.
Correct. And it's much harder to police that when people are working remote. And I think that goes back to creating good policy, procedures, having it documented to protect the business, but also the employee as well. We don't want them working extra hours that they don't have to be working and aren't getting compensated for. So, and I think this again goes to the value of having somebody that has a lot of experience working and managing these types of programs for businesses and protecting them. So for everybody out there, please reach out to Althea. She's very experienced. She can review all of your current policies. We can make recommendations for, if we, and I will say this as somebody that's worked with you for many years, if you think somebody's in the right place, you tell them they're in the right place.
Right.
We don't try to oversell people. We don't try to get people to buy things that they don't really need. And that's one of the things that's really endeared you to me, is that you have a very similar ethic when it comes to that scenario. Think of us as a resource. We're here to help you. We'd love to manage your policies for you. And we'd love to help you develop some of these policies and procedures to be able to protect your business and make sure that you have the right policies and protections in place in the event that something happens. So any last thoughts, Althea, before we end here?
I say, this is the new normal, and you've got to put the procedures, the framework around it now. It wasn't several months ago, but now we've had 18 months of this. And if you've made a conscious decision that your business will operate in this way with remote employees going forward, it's time to get that structure to protect yourself, your investment, your company, your employees, actually.
Yeah, and outside of the insurance area, if you need help from a technology standpoint, we have very good resources. Karin Weiss from Click came on and we talked the other day. They have a wonderful MSP solution in terms of helping set up those networks and making sure that employees are able to work remotely in a secure fashion. So please feel free to use this as a resource. We know lots of people that work in and around our areas of expertise. And honestly, we're just here to help. So let us know how we can help you. Thank you, Althea, for your day, and thank you,
Thank
everybody,
you,
for your
Steve.
consideration. Have a good one. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.